Lily had never traveled alone before. She wasn't even sure what to expect, but the adventure excited her. She had always listened to the stories her dad told about flying across the world, the places he had seen, and the people he had met. Now it was her turn. She was going to New York, and though she wasn't fully sure what awaited her there, the thought of seeing her dad again after so long filled her with excitement. Her mother had walked her to the airport, held her hand tightly, and told her to be brave, which wasn't too hard for Lily. She was used to being brave. Even when things felt too big, too overwhelming, the plane ride would be the easy part. It was the people around her that made everything harder. As Lily stood in line at the gate, she could feel her nerves bubbling up. She checked her ticket once again. Flight 1022 to New York City. She read out loud to herself, as if saying, the words would make them feel more real. The numbers danced on the paper in her hands. Her tiny fingers curled tightly around it. A quiet reassurance that she was indeed holding the key to her adventure. The waiting area was packed with people. Some were hunched over their phones, others talking in groups, and a few families were sitting, children spilling out of their seats, their laughter filling the space. But despite the noise, Lily felt like she was in a world of her own. She had the strange feeling of being invisible, as if the busy world around her couldn't see her standing there. It was as if they didn't know that she was just a little girl on her first big trip, trying to hold everything together. She wasn't sure how long she had been standing in line, but when she looked up, the crowd around her had thinned. It was her turn. The agent at the counter barely glanced at Lily as she approached. "Ticket, please," the woman said, her voice flat and without emotion. Lily handed it over eagerly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth as she imagined her father's big arms waiting at the other side of the gate. He had promised her he'd be there, waving excitedly as he spotted her at the airport. He had told her it would be like a movie, a reunion full of happiness and hugs. Lily's heart raced, just thinking about it. The agent, a middle-aged woman, with short-cropped hair and glasses perched low on her nose, took the ticket from Lily's hand and scanned it. She didn't smile, didn't say a word. Instead, she flicked her gaze to Lily, then back to the screen in front of her, her brow furrowing slightly. "Where's your guardian?" she asked, her tone harsh, like the question itself was a puzzle Lily had failed to solve. Lily blinked, her excitement draining away in an instant. "My dad is in New York," she said softly. "I'm traveling alone." The agent looked down at the ticket, and Lily could see her eyes scanning it with a detached focus. She was used to seeing people like this. Her mother often talked about how people didn't look at you. Not really, even when they should. It made Lily feel small, like she was nothing more than a piece of paper to be processed. Her presence barely acknowledged. The woman shook her head slowly, not meeting Lily's eyes. "No, no," she muttered under her breath. "You can't board. You're supposed to have someone with you. Go sit over there," she said, pointing to a small waiting area near the gate. Lily's heart sank. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain that her dad had already booked everything, that her mother had made sure everything was arranged, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't understand what was happening, why the woman was being so mean. "But my ticket says I can travel alone," Lily said quietly, barely able to make the words come out. The agent didn't even look at her. "I don't care what your ticket says. You're not going anywhere without a guardian. You'll have to wait until someone comes for you." The words felt like a punch to Lily's chest, her excitement now replaced with a heavy feeling she couldn't shake off. What did she do wrong? Why wasn't she allowed to board? She walked slowly to the side, away from the gate. Her little shoes made soft thuds against the floor as she passed rows of people who didn't notice her. They were busy with their own lives, their own trips. Lily wished she could disappear into the crowd, to be anywhere else. Sitting down, she buried her face in her hands, her heart racing. It felt like everyone was looking at her, judging her for something she didn't even understand. She wasn't crying though. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Her mother had told her to be brave, and she would try her best to be just that. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours. Time seemed to stretch on and on, the noise of the airport blending into a dull hum. The flight had already left without her, but no one had come to help. No one had come to explain what was going on. It felt like she had been forgotten, a small child left behind, waiting for someone to notice her, to help her. Suddenly, she heard a voice. "You okay?" It was a woman, sitting nearby, who had probably noticed Lily sitting alone, her face buried. in her hands. Lily nodded, though the lump in her throat made it hard to speak. "I'm fine," she whispered, but she wasn't fine. She was scared, confused, and so very alone. The woman smiled softly, but Lily didn't feel comforted. The woman's kindness was just another reminder that Lily had been abandoned, left behind by something she didn't understand. As she sat there, her mind wandered to her father. He was waiting for her. What would he think when he found out? She could almost see his face, his big, warm smile. How it would drop when he heard that she wasn't on the plane. She could hear him asking the same question she had. How could this have happened? She couldn't wait forever. Her stomach twisted in knots, not from hunger, but from the anxiety of not knowing what to do next. Lily was determined to find a way onto the next flight, but she needed someone to help her. Little did she know, her father was already getting the first hints of what had happened, and when he found out, things were going to get much more complicated. The person who had thought they could stop Lily was about to learn that sometimes the only thing stronger than a child's determination was the strength of a father's love. The phone in William's hand buzzed, a reminder of the time passing while he waited eagerly at the airport for his daughter. He had been pacing back and forth for over an hour, looking through the crowd of arriving passengers. Lily's flight should have landed by now. He had been waiting in this spot since before the plane was supposed to touch down, keeping an eye out for her small figure, excited and bright-eyed, coming off the plane. He was looking forward to this moment, seeing his daughter after months of not being able to hold her, not being able to hear her laugh in person. It had been a while since he had seen his little girl, and this visit, this moment, was important. To him, they had both waited too long for this reunion, but there was something wrong. He checked his phone again, waiting for a message or an update from Lily's mother. He had been getting regular updates as the day went on, but something had changed. His heart began to race. There was no news of Lily's arrival. Her mother's texts had stopped coming through. This wasn't like her. A wave of worry crashed over him as he tried to calm himself, checking the time once more. His daughter was never late, and the fact that she hadn't landed yet sent a chill down his spine. William started to dial her number, his fingers shaking slightly as he brought the phone to his ear. The first ring echoed in his head, then the second, then the third. She wasn't answering. William's stomach tightened. He didn't want to panic, but everything felt off. The seconds felt like minutes, and the minutes felt like hours. The seconds stretched out in painful silence until he couldn't wait anymore. Something was wrong. He needed to know what was happening. He dropped the call, turned around, and walked briskly to the nearest airport desk. The person behind the counter looked up as he approached, offering a polite but distracted smile. Barely glancing up from her computer, "Can I help you?" she asked in a flat tone. William's voice was tight, filled with urgency. "My daughter was supposed to be on flight 1022 from Chicago. She's not here. Can you tell me what's going on?" The woman's face shifted as she looked at her screen, her eyes scanning the information in front of her. William felt his breath catch in his throat. "Sir, it seems there's been an issue with your daughter's boarding process. She wasn't allowed to board." "What do you mean she wasn't allowed to board?" William's voice was growing louder now, the fear building into frustration. "She's a minor traveling alone." "What do you mean she wasn't allowed to board?" The woman hesitated, glancing at her colleague before answering. It appears there was some confusion about her status as an unaccompanied minor. She wasn't able to board the flight because the gate agent determined she wasn't authorized to travel. William's mind raced, trying to process the information. This didn't make sense. Lily was supposed to be on that plane, coming to him. She had a ticket. Everything was arranged. How could this happen? He demanded, his voice shaking with disbelief. "I've spoken to the airline. Her ticket was confirmed. She's listed as an unaccompanied minor. Why wasn't she allowed to board?" The woman's eyes softened, but the answer she gave only made the situation worse. "I'm sorry, sir. It's a policy we must follow. If there is any issue with the documentation, even if it's a small mistake, we have to refuse boarding. The agent at the gate couldn't process her properly, so they asked her to step aside." William felt the weight of the words crash over him, and in that moment, it was like the air around him grew thin. "She's alone," he said, barely able to hold himself together. "My little girl is alone at the airport. She doesn't know anyone here." The woman looked down at her desk, clearly uncomfortable. William could tell that this was routine for her, but for him, it felt like a nightmare. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. He needed to be with Lily, needed to know she was okay. Without another word, William rushed out of the counter area and straight to the gate where he hoped to find some answers. His heart pounded with every step, his mind racing with the terrible thought that Lily was waiting somewhere, scared and confused, without anyone to help her. He had no time to waste. When he arrived at the gate, he found the area mostly empty, a few passengers still milling around as they waited for the next flight. The boarding desk was vacant, and there was no sign of Lily. He approached the nearest employee, a young man with a headset, his eyes focused on his screen. "Where is my daughter?" William demanded. The young man glanced up, his expression blank at first, then confused when he saw the urgency in William's face. "Excuse me, sir," the young man said, standing up quickly. "I don't think I understand your daughter." "Lily," William snapped. "She was supposed to be on flight 1022. She's not on the plane, and I was told she was refused boarding." "Why?" The young man frowned and typed quickly on his screen. "Let me check." A long silence followed, and William's impatience grew. He was pacing again, every second that passed feeling like an eternity. Finally, the young man looked up. "I don't have all the details, but I do see that the gate agent, at the time of boarding, made the call to hold her back. They claimed that there was an issue with the unaccompanied minor status. She wasn't cleared to fly alone." William clenched his fists. She was cleared. She had everything. "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't anyone contact me?" The young man looked down, a faint hint of guilt on his face. "Sir, I'm really sorry. I can't explain everything. You'll have to speak with the gate supervisor for more details." William's frustration hit a boiling point, and he couldn't hold back any more. "Where is this supervisor?" "Down at gate 8, sir." Without another word, William turned and rushed to gate 8. His mind was a blur, his feet moving faster than he ever thought possible. Every second counted now. He couldn't lose his daughter. When he reached the gate, the supervisor was speaking with another passenger. She looked up as William approached, her eyes widening when she saw the intensity in his face. "I need to know why my daughter wasn't allowed on that plane," William said, his voice cold, demanding answers. The supervisor didn't flinch, but William saw her hesitate before responding. "I understand, sir, and I'm very sorry for the confusion. There was an issue at the gate with her paperwork." "Paperwork?" William snapped. "There's nothing wrong with her paperwork. She's my daughter. You let her on the flight." The supervisor sighed. "Sir, I can't just let anyone on a plane without proper clearance. She didn't have an adult with her, and it wasn't clear to the agent that she was properly documented." William took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool, but it was hard. "I've been through this already. She has her ticket. You need to fix this now." The supervisor nodded slowly, her face still showing the weight of the situation. "I'll do my best, sir. I will try to get her on the next available flight." "Try?" William's voice was edged with anger. "No, you'll do more than try. You'll fix this. She's my daughter, and I won't leave here until you do." The supervisor looked around, her eyes scanning the area as she realized that this wasn't just a small mistake. This was a mistake that would have consequences. She took a deep breath and nodded, finally giving in to the urgency in William's voice. "I'll make the call. I'll get her on the next flight, and I will personally ensure that she gets to you." William stood there for a moment, his heart still racing, his chest tight with worry. But for the first time in what felt like hours, he allowed himself to breathe a little. His daughter would be coming soon, and when she did, he would make sure no one ever doubted his love for her again. The minutes felt like hours to William as he waited at gate 8, pacing back and forth. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, none of them helpful, none of them bringing any relief. His daughter was alone somewhere in the airport, and he couldn't do anything to be with her. He kept thinking about the moment when he would finally see her, when he could wrap his arms around her and make everything better. But each second that passed without news only deepened the knot in his stomach. The airport was a labyrinth of terminals and walkways, and despite the fact that he had been here for what seemed like an eternity, he still couldn't shake the feeling of being completely lost, even though he knew he was just a few hundred feet away from the gate. It felt like the distance between him and Lily was 1,000 miles. He had no idea how long it would take for the supervisor to make things right. Every moment that passed made him feel more helpless. How did this happen? He kept replaying the conversation in his head, trying to find something, anything, he had missed. His daughter was supposed to have been cleared. This shouldn't have been an issue. But somehow, some way, things had gone terribly wrong. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone ringing again. His heart skipped a beat as he grabbed it, his fingers trembling. He didn't recognize the number, but he didn't care. It was news. It had to be. "Hello?" he said, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. "Mr. Harper." The voice on the other end was professional, calm, but with an underlying sense of urgency. "This is airport security. We've located your daughter." William's chest tightened as he stood frozen, unable to move or speak for a moment. His hands clenched around the phone. "Is she okay?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "She's fine, Mr. Harper," the voice said. "She's safe with us. Right now. We've already notified the gate supervisor, and she'll be brought to you shortly. We just need to confirm a few details." William's head was spinning. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His daughter Lily was safe. She was okay. After everything that had happened, he couldn't believe it. What happened? He demanded. "Why wasn't she allowed to board? Why didn't anyone contact me sooner?" "We're still investigating, sir. We had a miscommunication, and the gate agent made an incorrect judgment. We're handling it now." William's mind raced. He wanted to ask more questions, to demand answers, but his exhaustion and worry had worn him thin. All he could think about was getting to Lily, seeing her for himself, holding her in his arms. "Please," he said, "just bring her to me. Please make sure she's safe. We're on our way, Mr. Harper. You'll see her shortly. Just hang tight, please." The call ended abruptly, and William was left standing in the middle of the terminal, his heart still racing. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or angry, both emotions swirling together like a storm inside of him. His daughter was safe, but how had this even happened? Why hadn't anyone done their job properly? Why had he been forced to go through all of this? He ran his hands over his face, trying to collect his thoughts. He had to focus. The most important thing right now was that Lily was safe. That's all that mattered. As he paced again, he tried to imagine what Lily was feeling. The poor girl, barely old enough to understand the magnitude of what had happened to her. She was so brave, traveling alone for the first time, excited to see him, and yet she had been left stranded in a foreign airport, confused and scared. He couldn't imagine what she had gone through. He only hoped she hadn't felt too alone. The minutes dragged on, each one a heavy weight that pressed down on his chest. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't focus on anything except getting to Lily, making sure she knew she was loved and safe. Finally, the airport doors opened, and a woman stepped into the waiting area. She was holding a small bag, her eyes scanning the crowd. William felt a rush of hope, his heart skipping a beat. Was this her? Was this the moment? The woman's eyes locked onto his. There was no mistaking the familiarity in the way she looked at him. And as she approached, William's breath caught in his throat. He had seen her just a few moments ago, talking to the gate supervisor. But now, she was walking toward him with a purpose, a slight smile on her face. Behind her, he saw a small figure, standing just a few steps back, clutching a pink backpack. It was Lily. William's legs felt like they might give way beneath him as he rushed forward, his arms opening wide. Lily saw him and her face lit up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Daddy," she cried, running toward him. He bent down just as she reached him, scooping her up into his arms, feeling the warmth of her small body against his. For a moment, he simply held her, not saying a word, just feeling the relief flood through him. Lily buried her face in his shoulder, her small arms wrapping around his neck. William's hands shook as he held her, feeling the weight of everything that had happened lift off of his shoulders. She was safe. That was all that mattered. "I'm so sorry, baby," William whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I should have been there." Lily pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. Was scared, Daddy," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I thought you wouldn't come for me." William swallowed hard, trying to push back the lump in his throat. He kissed her forehead gently. "I'm here now, and I'll always be here for you. I won't ever let anything happen to you, I promise." The woman who had brought Lily to him stood at a respectful distance, watching the reunion with a kind smile. She knew the journey wasn't over, but for now, everything was okay. "Thank you," William said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You're welcome, Mr. Harper," the woman replied. "I'm just glad we were able to get her to you safely. If you need any further assistance, please don't hesitate to let us know." William nodded, still holding Lily close. His mind was racing again, the anger bubbling up inside him. He needed answers. This was far from over, but for now, all that mattered was that his daughter was in his arms, safe and sound. "Come on, Lily," he said, his voice steadying. "Let's get out of here." They walked together, the tension easing with every step. But William couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger problem. When they left the terminal and stepped into the warmth of the New York City air, he vowed to make sure no one ever treated his daughter that way again. The city skyline stretched out beyond the airport parking lot, but William hardly noticed any of it as he carried Lily toward his car. The sound of planes roaring overhead faded into the background while his focus stayed locked on the little girl clinging to him. Her small hands gripped his shirt as if letting go would make him disappear. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the way her breath came in shallow bursts, and he knew that whatever had happened back at that gate had left a mark far deeper than she could put into words. He set her down gently beside the car and opened the door, helping her climb inside. She didn't speak, only looked at him with wide, tired eyes. The pink backpack she carried rested on her lap like a shield, her arms still wrapped around it. William wanted to tell her everything was fine now, but the words felt hollow in his mouth. He knew the truth was more complicated. She was here, yes, but she had been humiliated, frightened, and left alone by people who should have protected her. That was not something he could ignore. As he slid into the driver's seat, he took a deep breath and started the engine, the low hum filling the silence between them. He glanced at her again before pulling out of the lot. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked gently. Lily's eyes flickered away from his and down to her shoes. "The lady at the gate didn't believe me," she whispered. "She said I couldn't go. She told me to sit down and wait. People kept looking at me, but nobody helped." William's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. He could hear the shame in her voice, and it cut through him like a blade. "Did she say why?" "She said I didn't have someone with me," Lily said, her voice trembling. "But Mum told them I was traveling alone, and they said it was fine before. The lady didn't care. She just kept letting other people go through." William's mind raced as the anger built inside him. This wasn't just an inconvenience, this was negligence. They had left a child stranded, ignored her ticket, and disregarded the arrangements her parents had made. He knew this wasn't going to end here. They drove in silence for a while, the city slowly drawing closer. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road, and William's mind replayed the image of his daughter sitting in that terminal, alone and scared. Every time he thought about it, he felt a fresh surge of fury. He had always been protective of Lily, but this felt different. This felt like someone had deliberately failed her. As they stopped at a red light, William reached for his phone. "I need to make a call," he told her. "It's about what happened today." He dialed the airline's customer service line, the automated voice greeting him with a cheerful tone that only made his frustration rise. He navigated the menu with clipped responses until finally a human voice answered. "This is William Harper," he began, his voice steady but laced with steel. "My daughter, an unaccompanied minor, was denied boarding on Flight 1022 from Chicago today, despite having a valid ticket and proper documentation. She was left alone in your terminal without supervision or assistance for over an hour. I need to speak to a manager immediately." There was a pause on the other end before the representative responded, her tone cautious. "Sir, I understand your concern, but I'll need to pull up the record to see exactly what happened." "Do it," William said sharply. "And while you're at it, explain to me how a trained gate agent could ignore both your own policy and the safety of a child. I'm not leaving this alone. Someone is going to answer for what happened today." Lily shifted slightly in her seat, glancing at her father with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. She had never seen him like this before, calm but dangerous, his words cutting and deliberate. The representative eventually transferred him to a supervisor, who began the familiar corporate routine of apologizing and promising to look into the matter. William listened just long enough to make it clear that he wasn't satisfied. "No," he interrupted. "You're going to do more than look into it. I want the name of the agent who denied her boarding. I want to know why I was never contacted, and I want to know exactly what your company is going to do to make sure this never happens again. If you can't give me those answers now, then get me someone who can." The voice on the other end hesitated before agreeing to escalate the matter to the airline's regional manager. William ended the call with a promise to follow up within 24 hours. His jaw tight as he slid the phone back into his pocket. Lily finally spoke up. "Are they in trouble?" "They should be," William said simply. "What they did was wrong, and I'm not going to let them pretend it didn't happen." By the time they reached his apartment, the evening air had cooled, carrying the faint scent of rain. William helped Lily out of the car and led her inside, where the warm glow of the living room lights offered a stark contrast to the cold atmosphere of the airport. She seemed to relax slightly, setting her backpack down and curling up on the couch. He brought her a blanket and sat beside her, watching as she wrapped it around herself. "You're safe now," he reminded her softly. "And tomorrow, we're going to make sure they know exactly what they did." Lily nodded, but didn't say much. She leaned against him, her breathing slowing, the weight of the day finally beginning to lift. But for William, the weight remained. He knew the fight wasn't over. As the night deepened and Lily drifted to sleep, William sat in the dim light, staring out the window at the city below. The hum of traffic far away was a reminder that the world kept moving, even when yours had been shaken to the core. He picked up his phone again, scrolling through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. An old friend from his military days who now worked in aviation law. If the airline thought this would be settled with an empty apology, they were about to learn otherwise. Tomorrow, William decided, he would not just ask for answers, he would demand them. And if they didn't come willingly, he would make sure they were forced into the open. This was no longer just about Lily's missed flight. This was about the principle. No one had the right to treat a child the way they treated her and think they could walk away without consequence. The next morning came with a grey overcast sky and the low rumble of distant thunder, as if the city itself was unsettled. William was up before dawn, the quiet apartment filled only with the faint sound of Lily's breathing from the other room. He had not slept much. His mind had been running through every detail of the day before, every mistake the airline had made, every minute his daughter had been left frightened and alone. He had made a promise to himself that today would not end without real answers and real accountability. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Pulling out his laptop, he began typing, his fingers moving fast as he drafted a detailed account of everything that had happened, the times, the names, the sequence of events, and the emotional impact it had on Lily. He knew facts mattered in situations like this, but so did the story. He wanted whoever read this to feel the weight of what had been done. When Lily woke, she shuffled into the kitchen, wearing one of his old t-shirts that hung loosely on her small frame. She gave him a sleepy smile before sitting down. "Morning, Daddy," she said softly. "Morning, baby," he replied, smiling back despite the heaviness inside him. "We're going to have breakfast, and then we've got something important to do today." She tilted her head curiously. "What's that?" "We're going to make sure no one else has to go through what you went through," he said firmly. "That means talking to the people in charge." After breakfast, William made a call to his friend Marcus, the aviation lawyer he had served with years ago. Marcus listened quietly as William laid out the situation, occasionally interrupting to ask specific questions. When William finished, Marcus's tone was calm but purposeful. "They broke multiple federal guidelines for unaccompanied minors," Marcus said. "You have a strong case, Will, but if you want immediate results, you're going to have to make them move now, not later. Airlines are good at burying things unless you force their hand." "What are you suggesting?" William asked. "I'm suggesting you go back to the airport today. Make sure your complaint is filed in person with the highest-ranking operations manager on duty. If they stall you or give you the runaround, you make it clear you're prepared to file with the Department of Transportation and the FAA. Trust me, they don't want that kind of heat, and if you really want their attention," Marcus paused for effect, "you could make it clear that you will not allow one of their departures to leave until you've spoken with someone who can make this right." William knew Marcus was serious. He also knew it was risky, but he wasn't afraid of confrontation when it came to protecting Lily. "All right," he said. "We'll head there after lunch." By early afternoon they were back at the airport. The air inside was cooler than outside, the usual smell of coffee and travel mingling in the terminals. William carried a thick folder of printed documents, Lily's boarding pass, the airline's unaccompanied minor policy, notes from yesterday, and even photos of the gate where she had been stopped. They made their way to the main customer service desk, where a young woman in a neatly pressed uniform greeted them. "How can I help you today, sir?" she asked politely. "I need to speak to the operations manager." William said without hesitation. The woman's smile faltered slightly. May I ask what this is regarding? Yes, William said sharply. It's regarding my 8th daughter being illegally denied boarding yesterday and left unattended in your terminal, and I will not leave this airport until I've spoken to someone who can address that directly. The woman's eyes widened slightly before she excused herself and disappeared into a back office. Within minutes, a man in a dark blazer appeared, his badge identifying him as the station operations manager. His smile was polite but guarded. Mr. Harper, I understand you had a serious issue yesterday. Let's step into my office and talk. William followed him, with Lily close by. The office was small but private, with a single desk and 2 chairs. The manager gestured for them to sit. I've reviewed part of the incident report. He began carefully. First, I want to apologize for the distress caused to your daughter. That should not have happened. Apologies don't fix what happened, William said evenly. She was denied boarding despite having all necessary paperwork. She was left unsupervised for over an hour. I want the name of the gate agent who made that decision, the exact reason given, and an explanation for why no one contacted me immediately. And I want to know what disciplinary action will be taken. The manager shifted uncomfortably. I understand, sir, but there are internal processes. William leaned forward, his voice dropping into something quiet but dangerous. If you tell me to wait for your internal process, I will walk out onto your tarmac and make sure one of your departures does not leave this airport today. Then you can explain to the FAA why a father had to ground a flight just to get answers about his child's safety. The room went silent. The manager's eyes narrowed slightly, measuring whether William was bluffing, but there was no bluff. You have until the next scheduled departure from this terminal to give me those answers. William continued. If I don't have them by then, I will take action. And trust me, every camera in this building will be rolling. The manager swallowed, his calm facade cracking. All right, give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, William had the name of the gate agent, the full account of her so-called judgment call, and a written commitment from the airline to review their unaccompanied minor protocols. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was leverage, and leverage meant he wasn't done yet. As they left the office, Lily looked up at him. Daddy, were you really going to stop a plane from leaving? William smiled faintly. If I had to. Some things are worth the trouble, and you're one of them. They walked out into the terminal together, the hum of travel resuming around them. But William's resolve was stronger than ever. This fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The terminal felt like it was buzzing louder than before, the distant announcements blending with the steady hum of passengers moving in all directions. But William heard only the steady beat of his own heart. He had the documents in his hand, now, the ones that named the gate agent and detailed the so-called decision-making process that had left Lily stranded. The airline thought this might be enough to calm him, but they were wrong. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. This was about principle. This was about making sure that what had happened to his daughter never happened to anyone else. He looked down at Lily walking beside him, her small hand wrapped in his. She had that quiet bravery about her again, the same bravery she had shown yesterday, even when everything around her fell apart. But William could still see the shadows in her eyes, the unspoken memory of sitting alone, ignored by strangers while the plane that should have taken her to safety left without her. That was not something he was going to let fade quietly into the background. They stopped at a cafe in the terminal, not because he wanted coffee, but because from this spot, he could see directly through the glass to the gate where the next departure was preparing for boarding. The plane sat on the tarmac, its nose angled toward the runway, its engines still quiet. Boarding would start in less than 30 minutes. William's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. If you want to make this count, you have to make sure they feel it publicly. William typed back a single sentence. It's time. When boarding began, William rose from the table and walked directly to the gate. Lily stayed by his side, her presence a reminder to everyone watching exactly why he was there. The gate agent looked up, startled, as he approached. Sir, are you traveling? She asked hesitantly. No, William said, his voice calm but carrying weight. But this plane isn't leaving until I speak to your station director, right? Here in front of these passengers. The agent blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Sir, I can't. You can, William interrupted, his tone cutting through her protest. And you will. I am the father of an Child, your company left alone in this airport yesterday because one of your agents decided to ignore policy and decency. I have been given partial answers but no real accountability. I have spoken to your operations manager, and now I'm going to speak to the person in charge of this entire terminal. Until that happens, no one boards this plane. Passengers nearby had begun to turn their heads, some pulling out phones, recording the scene. The murmurs grew louder, the crowd sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The agent reached for her radio, her voice tight as she called for the station director. Within minutes, a man in a tailored suit appeared, walking quickly toward the gate with 2 other staff members at his side. He had the polished look of someone used to controlling situations, but William met his gaze with an unshakable stare. I understand you've had an incident, the director began, but William cut him off before he could slip into rehearsed. Apologies, you don't understand anything, William said, his voice firm but never raised. What you have is a public relations disaster waiting to happen if you don't address this right here and right now. Yesterday, your staff refused to let my daughter board a plane she was ticketed for, a plane she had been cleared to fly on, and left her alone in your terminal without so much as calling me. That is neglect. That is dangerous. And if you think I'm letting one more of your aircraft leave without the public knowing exactly what you did, you're mistaken. The director glanced at the growing crowd and the number of phones pointed in their direction. His jaw tightened. Mr. Harper, please, let's talk about this in my office. No, William said. We'll talk here, in front of the people who deserve to know how your airline treats its passengers, especially its most vulnerable ones. The silence that followed was heavy, all eyes fixed on them. William reached into his folder and held up the paperwork, the printed copy of the airline's own unaccompanied minor policy, with the section highlighted where they had failed. Your own policy states that minors are to be escorted and supervised at all times, and that any denial of boarding requires immediate contact with the guardian. None of that happened. My daughter was treated like she didn't matter, and I will not leave this gate until I know the agent responsible is facing consequences and that this will never happen again. The director knew there was no moving this conversation out of public view now. With cameras rolling and passengers already whispering, he nodded stiffly. The agent will be suspended, pending investigation. We will issue a formal public apology, and I will personally ensure that our unaccompanied minor procedures are retrained across all staff. That's a start, William said, but I want that apology today, and I want it given to my daughter first. The director looked down at Lily, whose small frame seemed even smaller in the shadow of the moment, but whose eyes met his with quiet strength. He crouched slightly to her level. Lily, I am so sorry for what happened to you yesterday. It was wrong, and we failed you. I promise we will do everything we can to make sure no other child ever goes through what you did. Lily didn't speak right away. She looked up at her father, then back at the director, and finally gave a small nod. Okay, she said softly. William straightened, his voice carrying for everyone to hear. I'm satisfied for now, but know this, I will be watching, and if I hear of this happening again, I will be back. And next time, it won't just be one flight that doesn't leave. With that, he took Lily's hand and turned away from the gate. Passengers stepped aside as they walked past, some giving small nods of respect, others quietly murmuring their approval. The phones that had been recording stayed trained on them until they disappeared into the terminal's main concourse. Outside, the rain had finally begun to fall, the air cool and clean. William felt Lily squeeze his hand a little tighter, and when he looked down at her, she was smiling faintly. You really did ground the flight, she said. He chuckled softly. Sometimes, you have to stand your ground to protect what matters. Most they walked on together through the rain, the chaos of the last 2 days finally beginning to settle into quiet resolve. For William, this was not just the end of a fight. It was proof that when it came to his daughter's safety, there was nothing he wouldn't do. That the end.